In today's episode, William J. Carl shares the inspiration behind Assassin's Manuscript, his research process, as well as the challenges of crafting a thriller that spans continents and centuries. His son David Carl joins the conversation, discussing his experience narrating the audiobook and bringing the characters to life. So stay with us and tune in for a thrilling conversation on writing, research, and the art of storytelling. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away, we will be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors, and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story, discover how authors breathe life into characters, and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us only on Books with Bridgetti.
If you have just joined our live stream, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. Our stream is made possible by StreamYard and BeLive Media, and in today's show we talk to the very talented William J. Carl and also David Carl about the Assassin's Manuscript, which has taken the literary world by storm. We'll explore the intricacies of this gripping thriller and the inspiration behind it. So if you haven't met the authors yet, William J. Carl is a Greek scholar, a screenwriter, playwright, and former professor. He's also a seminary president and pastor who has spoken at Oxford, Cambridge, Princeton, Cornell, Boston University, Carnegie Mellon, and many other schools across the US and globally. He is the author of 8 nonfiction books and 1 novel, Assassin's Manuscript, which we're going to talk about today. David, his son, is a versatile actor. He is a voiceover artist and a writer based in New York City. He's known for his very impressive impressions and accents, and has created several solo shows, including David Carl's celebrity one-man Hamlet and Trump Lear. David has narrated audiobooks like the one we're talking about today, Assassin's Manuscript, bringing characters to life with his unique voice and style. And just maybe we'll ask him to give us a sample. So stay with us. Let's get them to join us on today's show, shall we? Gentlemen, welcome. I am so delighted that you're able to join us on the show today. I just love that we can come together from wherever we are in the world, and I look forward to talking to you about Assassin's Manuscript. So both William and David, a hearty warm welcome to Books with Bridgetti, and also a hearty warm welcome to our audience out there who is joining us live, and those who are watching the replay, welcome to you as well. So I'm going to jump right in. For the next hour, we're going to talk all things about this amazing manuscript. So I think, William, I'm going to start with you. What inspired you to write a thriller that spans continents and centuries? And how did your background in Greek scholarship influence the narrative?
Great question. Well, I have, as you said, published eight nonfiction books. And I was thinking that was the only kind of book I would write. But the author of Roots, Alex Haley, was sitting in my office over 30 years ago, getting ready to speak at an event we were having there in Dallas, Texas. And he asked me if I'd written anything. I said, yeah, a bunch of nonfiction books. He said, well, let me see one. So I pulled one off the shelf, which was a set of lectures I'd given at Princeton. And he is sitting there thumbing and reading this book. And all of a sudden he looks up at me and he says, you need to write a novel. And I said, Alex, what makes you say that? He said, two things. One, you know how to write and you write really well. This is the author of Roots telling me I write really well. He said, and the second thing is, you know how to tell a story, and that's all a novel is. And I said, what in the world would I write a novel about? He said, what do you like? Oh, Tom Clancy, you know, Robert Ludlum, the Jason Bourne types, international espionage. He said, write one like that. I said, this is not my world, Alex. I don't know anything about those kind of things, except I like those kind of books and movies. He said, well, you're a Greek scholar. You know about old manuscripts. Combine that with espionage and see what comes out. So that's what I did, and traveled to 7 foreign countries doing the research and interviewing lots of really fascinating people I can tell you about eventually. But this is really a Dan Brown meets Daniel Silva thriller. So you can think of James Bond and Indiana Jones, you know, together in the same story. And that's how I got into it in the first place.
My goodness. Wow, that's amazing. And how did you balance the multiple plot threads and characters in Assassin's Manuscript? And what would you say was the most challenging part of the whole writing process for you?
Right. You know, when I speak or encourage and challenge people to speak, I always tell them, know where you're going. And when I talk to people about writing, I say, know where you're going, know how you're going to end if you can. Have that in mind and then write to that. And then you create some outline and then you may figure out where you're going to start. So I had different starting points because those can change. In fact, my editor, Charles Cornwell, who is the former husband and former editor for Patricia Cornwell and all her novels, was my editor all the way through. And he got me to change the beginning right at the end, right before I published it. So this does have a lot of characters and a lot of places around the world, not as many as the original version that had 740 pages, and I reduced it to 384. But Bridgetti, I try to think about this, and David could weigh in because he read earlier versions of it, and I think he was 12 or 13 when I started working on it, and he could talk about my process that he viewed as my son. But when I first started, I just started thinking of this as like a giant quilt, but I'm only working on the outer edges now. And as the readers begin to get into the story, they don't see how the different pieces fit together. But as you read farther and farther into the book, you start seeing them to begin to connect to the point they finally connect at the end. And, you know, my wife, Jane, works on jigsaw puzzles a lot. And she will never look at the cover because she wants the challenge of, I don't know how this is supposed to come out. And that's what I want readers to feel. They don't know how the puzzle is going to get put together, but as they begin to find corner pieces and other pieces, they begin to pull it together. And eventually you begin to see the whole picture of what's going to happen, even though there are surprises as you go along. David, you talk a little about what it was like when you were a kid watching me work on this thing.
Well, yeah. As you know, every time we talk about this, I think I realize a different thing. And as you're saying it today, you know, I was probably 12 when you started, around that age. And, you know, my dad was the boss where he worked. And so I thought it was kind of cool that he was seeking out people to give him notes. And because, at work, he was pretty good about listening to people and saying and taking constructive criticism. But I thought it was, as a 12-year-old, I thought, oh, this is cool. He wrote this big, long first draft, and he wanted feedback, because I would read it and I'd like it. I'm like, oh, this is good. It's long, but I like it. And, but he'd get feedback from different people, and he'd seek it out. And he'd be like, oh, I got a note from another person. I was like, you gave another person the manuscript? You wanted another note? He's like, yeah. And so I thought that was a nice example for me to see as a young person, to see like, oh, like it's good to want feedback. It's good to want, from trusted people, from people that you respect. So yeah, I thought that was great to get to be exposed to at that age.
Yeah, and David read several versions and would give me notes, and even say, honestly, I don't think it's quite ready to put out there. But that last time you read it, I think you read the whole thing, a plane from New York to LA or something like that. You just zipped through it.
Yeah, I really did.
It is a fast-paced story, and I think you said, okay, that's it. This is it. Let's go with it.
Yeah, it really was a page turner. And when I was 12 or 13 in the 90s, growing up in Texas, I was very much into this genre, and I think now it's not really my number one genre. And even that said, I found myself really enjoying reading it, even though I knew the story. This final revision really made me say, all right, this is I don't think it's just that it's my dad. This is a good execution of this kind of story.
And this was the 12th revision, by the way, Bridgetti, the 12th revision.
Yeah.
But Charles Frazier rewrote Cold Mountain 20 times, so who's counting? I love the line Stephen King. I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I don't read many of his novels, even though he's an amazing writer. But he has a wonderful book called On Writing. And I love the line he has in there: to write is human, to edit is divine. And that's really true. You want to trust your editors, and the people are going to be honest with you. So the first version, 740 pages, I took into a literary agent, dropped it on his desk. He said, you nearly broke my desk with that thing. Go take 200 pages out and I'll look at it. And that's when I had to learn how to write screenplays, and even published, won the Telluride Indie Fest screenwriting contest with a totally different romantic comedy, and have turned it into a play, and I'm turning it into a musical. But learning how to write screenplays helped me as a novelist tighten the story and make the dialogue crisper. It also helped me think about the characters more. David understands this because David's a writer and an actor. And at some point we need to get him to tell what George Clooney was like as a director, because David was in George Clooney's The Tinder Bar, and he's been on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and with all those wonderful actors on Netflix. But he understands about character as an actor. He's been trained as an actor to make sure you're getting inside that character. What does that character's want or need? What are the flaws? What are, all those kinds of things. So I had to get inside those kinds of ways of thinking about my characters, because the truth is, you're not going to read a book unless you care about the characters,
Well, I think you've just kind of nailed it. If you want your kid to become an actor, just throw a 700-page novel at him and tell him to read it.
Yeah, definitely. That was what happened.
You definitely cut your teeth on the whole editing process from an early age.
Well, it was pretty low pressure, But yeah, sure. Yeah, it was fun. Your dad writes a action adventure novel. It's exciting to read it. It's way more fun than whatever you have for homework.
Oh, I'm sure.
Even though I liked reading, I loved English, I loved theater, and so I was the perfect sort of nerd to take on this assignment. You know, and I say nerd in a nice way. I think nerds are great.
So, David, as the narrator of the audiobook, how did you prepare for the role, and what was your experience like bringing the characters to life? Because by this time you knew them quite intimately, because I mean you were there sort of from the creation of the characters. So what was that like?
Well, I'm kind of a methodical person, and I followed guidance of other friends of mine that have done more audiobooks than I have. This is actually my first one that's by myself. So I've done voices for multicast audiobooks for several James Patterson books, but this was my first time doing the whole thing. So I got organized, and I said, let me go through each character, and kind of, we actually did it in real time. My dad and I set up a Zoom session or a phone call, and we just kind of went through each character, and I had worked on some ideas for what they sounded like, and we just went through them to make sure that we're okay to go on all of them. So when I start going through them, and then I made a file with each one so I knew what they sounded like, because he's got so many characters that, you know, if we sat down in early June and then in August I get to the chapter with 12 Russians, you know, I better have a recording of each one, unless I want my dad to say, hey, you know, this doesn't sound like what we talked about. You know? So I have to have a very organized system for myself. Everyone works differently, obviously. And then same thing for any words that we need to make sure they're pronounced correctly. And there are many in this book that I needed to make. We're dealing with different languages, some ancient, and, you know, I mean, but the nice thing is I have a good relationship with the author, and it's easy to get him on the phone and have him tell me how to say the word. So that was fun. And so all of that is sort of like the boring organizational prep, so that then I can go through each chapter and have fun with it, and not be looking stuff up every single time I get to something that I would have to look up.
Tell
You know,
her
the
about
key
the
thing
studio.
that I'm hearing.
Go, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What I'm hearing from both of you is the amount of preparation it takes to produce something really, really good. And every good author that I've interviewed, their work is no accident. Every bit of the work is by design. And so just listening to the two of you, that entire book was well designed, and it was an iterative process, you know, over a bit. How many years did it take for you to complete, William?
Over 30 years. Now, understand that I had a full-time job all the way through, and I just retired 4 years ago. And so 2 years into my retirement is when I finally got it finished and ready to go and put it out there. So,
well, to everybody out there saying that, you know, I'll never get a book done, I think, William, you're only the second author I've had in 6 years that said they wrote their book over a period of 30 years. So, like, just never give up, you know, just don't give up.
That's right.
Keep going, keep iterating, keep making it better and better and better. And I think we cannot stress enough the importance of having a good editor. It is so key to the final product.
That's right.
Now, William, you are also a former CIA operative. How did you?
That is so funny.
One of your many caps.
Some of the podcast interviewers asked me, "Wait a minute, is this autobiographical? This Assassin's Manuscript, is this autobiographical?" And I always pause and say, "Well, you know, all writing is autobiographical," just to make them think a little. And then I said, also, I had 3 years of Taekwondo karate training in seminary as an extracurricular course to be able to handle rough parishioners, you know, and because of that, I can describe the action scenes with the karate in the novel. But no, I never worked for the CIA. I have never killed anyone. And like my main character. My main character is a little bit like, if you remember the movie The Quiet Man with John Wayne, who goes home to Ireland, and he was a boxer. And it's an older movie, and Maureen O'Hara's in it. It's a wonderful, fun movie. And he apparently, in backstory, we find out, and I think the priest figures it out, that he killed somebody in the ring in a boxing match. And it so changed him that he just didn't think he could box anymore. So my character's a little bit like that, because in an opening scene, which now is handled in flashbacks thanks to Charles Cornwell, his last hit for the CIA went bad. He was supposed to kill this Bedouin terrorist who was going to release a bio weapon in the subways in Manhattan, but instead the Bedouin's girlfriend comes and gets in the minivan that has the bomb. My main character, Adam Hunter's new wife, is walking down the same street because she'd seen a note where he was going to be, and she wanted to come surprise him. And then a man is walking up. So when the bomb goes off, it kills the Bedouin's girlfriend, kills Adam's own wife, it kills this man from Tennessee. And so in the intervening years, Adam has gone to seminary, and now he's come to Tennessee to be close to the woman who was the fiance of the man he killed. And she gets interested in him and actually gets caught up in his intrigue around the Middle East and falls in love with him, not knowing that he killed her fiance by accident. So you have this unlikely romance. And this story is not a typical Tom Clancy story where the Americans are all good guys and everybody else are bad guys. In this story, everyone is broken and flawed, including my main character. I can't remember which theologian said it, may have been Augustine, that there is good in every evil person and evil in every good one. So we have these nuanced characters.
Wait, just repeat that again, because that's quite a key takeaway.
Yes, there is good in every evil person and evil in every good one. So we're all a little bad, and the hope is we all have more than a little good, but we have some good, some have more than others. And that makes the characters more nuanced. And David can tell you, as an actor and a writer of shows that he's written, that when the characters are more nuanced and multidimensional, they're more interesting to play as an actor, and probably more interesting to direct as a director. David, would you agree with that, you think?
Definitely. Without question. I mean, right, we're reading a book, or we're going to see a play or watch a movie, and we wanted to ring true a little bit to the experience of being human. And obviously people are quite complex. And so the more that you can go towards that goal of creating these sort of multidimensional characters, the more I think audience or reader is going to be engaged. And I think one of the great things about that, like if your goal is, okay, I'm going to sit down and make my characters more multidimensional. Well, you're never going to hit an endpoint on that. And so some people might say, wait, where's my 100%? Where's my A+? What am I done? It's like, well, the cool thing is you're kind of never done. I mean, eventually you publish it and you say, all right, that's it. That's as far as I went. I leave it up to the readers to fill in any blanks I might have left. But there's a weird freedom if you can get your mind behind it of the A+ is me working on it. The A+ is me continuing to shape it. And I think a lot of creative people sometimes are still stuck, not even in art school, in like math class, trying to get that A+. From who? Who knows? They don't even know. You go to therapy and try to figure that out. But it's a real block for people that I know. I mean, I go through it. I'll be working on something and I'm thinking, I've been hired for this job. They're paying me, and I'm sitting here thinking about it like it's a homework assignment that I need to get A+ on. But no, that's not what it is. These are basic principles that you just work on as much as you can, and then at some point they say cut, and that's it, or it's time to print, and that's it, or whatever. But I think there's a freedom that can come from that if we allow ourselves to let that happen, as opposed to being intimidated by it. It's one of those paradoxes of creating that I think can set you free if you let it.
So I will thank you for that, David. I'm always learning from you every time you open your mouth. That's really fun to be able to learn from your children. A couple of things. One is I write in a very direct style. It's more Hemingway than Faulkner, and because I like to just put it out there and catch your attention quickly, and short chapters and all that. But so it's kind of a beach read. At the same time, there's some literary depth going on here, because Adam comes from the Hebrew word for humankind, and hunter he's in search of something. So Adam represents a violent humanity out of control in search of peace, right? And Rennie, the main female character who falls in love with him, her name comes from Irene, which in Greek means peace. And she's the only one who can complete his mythic story. So we have this deeper literary mythic thing going on, and it actually follows Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces that George Lucas used in the Star Wars movie, so that ordinary characters got to leave ordinary world and make a decision to go to extraordinary world, meets with mentor, which is Yoda. In my case, the mentor is Stump Stevens, the former CIA, the African-American former CIA director. And then we have a shadow self, which in the Star Wars movies is Darth Vader. In mine, it's the Bedouin. And all of that literary depth is going on. Even the names mean something, but I never say anything about those. That's for the reader and book clubs and reviewers to go, ooh, look at this deeper stuff that's going on, bubbling beneath the surface. And so that I just really got to know these characters so well. It's really funny. I've told other people, they would actually talk to me. I don't know if, Bridgetti, I don't know if you've had other authors say that they got to know the character so well. They'd actually have conversations with them. Yeah. And they would say things like, no, that's not the way I would say that. Here's how I would say that. Or, no, I wouldn't do that in this situation. Here's what I would do. And it was just like, it was almost spooky, but that's when you get to know your character so well. And part of my research for understanding Adam was I actually met and interviewed 4 real assassins and the son of one, 3 Americans, 1 Israeli, and 1 Russian. And people are always going, how in the world did you meet?
Yeah, I was to tell. I was going to like, how?
Well, David knows I'm a bit of an extrovert, so I will walk into a restaurant with our family and just walk around to booths and tables and start asking people, is that good? Do you like that? And they'll look at me like, yeah, I guess so. And my family's like, we don't know him. We can't take him out in public, that kind of stuff. But I like to meet people and get to know them. And one was a taxi driver in Louisville, Kentucky, who picked me up at midnight, took me to the Brown Hotel downtown. I could tell he wasn't from Kentucky because his heavy New York, a cup of coffee, New York accent, And I said, when'd you come here? He said, I came here after Nam. He was this gruff looking guy with a beard and everything. And I said, oh, what'd you do in Nam? Oh, I was in the operation, the Phoenix operation, the Phoenix program. And I knew that was assassins. So I said, do you have to pick anybody else up? He goes, no, you're my last one. And I said, if I cross your palm with $100 bill, can we have a drink and you can tell me stories? Hell yeah. And so we did. And this guy, stories about the Viet Cong and on and on. he was a little scary just to be around us, but I learned about my character. And then another American is actually a librarian at a seminary. He is a theologian who had worked for the CIA, and he said, yeah, there are countries I can't even go to now. And that's like my main character, who's CIA hitman, becomes a minister, yada yada. And then one was the son of a hitman. I was lecturing at a college, I won't say which one, and I had finished. And he said, what are you working on? I told him. And this young man comes up to me. He's a philosophy professor. He said, that's what my dad used to do. Can we go have a drink and talk about it? Sure. And he said, yeah, he confessed on his deathbed. That's, son, when I said I was going on trips for the government, that's what I used to do. And then he died, and he said, you would never have guessed it. He was a regular little league dad in the neighborhood. Then I began to learn that real assassins could be like your next door neighbor. Or they could be like, you're having a cup of coffee and you say, wait a minute, I'll be back in a few minutes. They go out and kill somebody, come right back in. So they're cold as ice, they're calm, and they only become vulnerable if something really bad happens, like what happened to Adam, killing his own wife by accident. The Israeli told me he had air fat in his sights twice, and the order to take the shot never came, which is kind of chilling to think. And then the Russian is a pastor up in the Ural Mountains in a church that's in a bomb shelter 3-story below ground, the place where I spoke. And he's a former Russian mafia chief who murdered a lot of people and then became a minister. And by the way, the cover of the book, I typed all the Greek that's on the cover there. It's in Greek uncials to look like the Codex Sinaiticus, which I have stolen from the British Museum in London. And when we get to that chapter, and in the audiobook particularly, David does, I don't know, I think you do like 5 different British accents, David, in that one chapter called Sleight of Hand. But in that cover, that is, I don't say this in the novel or anything, but I just say this is Acts chapter 9, the beginning of Acts, which is the conversion of Saul on the Damascus Road. So hidden in the cover in code is a metaphor for my main character, former murderer becomes minister, so big transformation that occurs. You're muted right now.
Amazing, like just wow. So how do you think the audiobook enhances the thriller genre, and why do you think that the Assassin's Manuscript was particularly suited to audio narration, or was that just something you decided on because of David? Whose idea was it to turn it into audio?
Yeah, let me weigh in, and David can answer too. So the book was out for almost a year, I think, and I had a lot of friends and even some family members said, no, I haven't read your book yet. You know how people will say that. And then they finally confessed. They said, I don't read books. I listen to them when I'm at the fitness center, or when I'm out running on a trail, or when I'm driving in a car stuck on the freeway. I listen to books on audiobook. And you ought to think about that. Well, I looked around and I hadn't even listened to that many audiobooks, but I have Audible. I can use Audible on Amazon. So I checked out a few, and I remember David had done parts of James Patterson novels, and I've even heard some of what he does. And so they have this way when you go on ACX, which is the way to do audiobooks on Amazon. They have this way of you can interview people who do narrations. And you can even listen to some of theirs, and you can have them read part of yours and then decide who you're going to hire. And I got to thinking, this is ridiculous. My own son does this. Why would I be hiring somebody else? Well, the guy's a pro. And so I brought it up to David, and I think we were still heavy in the pandemic at the time. And we were like, and you weren't getting as much. You can't go audition as much and whatever, except
well, yeah. So I'll weigh in there. Weirdly, during the pandemic, I worked more than most of my career. The specific part he's talking about is a year ago, the strike started.
That's what it is.
And with the strike, I literally couldn't do most of what I normally can. One of the few categories that was not striking was audiobooks. Add to that.
Wow, that's quite interesting.
Yeah. Add to that, I was in a terrible injury about a year ago where I fractured 6 ribs in my clavicle, and one of my ribs poked a hole in my lung. So I needed to recover for about 4 months. And all of this swirling together led us to a conversation about, well, why don't we do this audiobook? And, I think we've both been kind of careful, like, hey, we got a really good father-son friendly relationship here. Let's not like just jump into working on something together right away. But this one just made so much sense that we were like, well, yeah, this is it. This will be a good trial run for collaborating and, gambling our good relationship on it. And I think it was a very safe, good gamble. It was a lot of fun to work on. And as soon as we started talking about it, I realized, well, this is going to be like time travel for me, because any given chapter reminds me of when I remember him working on that. So maybe it'll make me feel like I'm 13 or 21 or, any different age. That was an incredibly fun thing to, just by reading this book, reading this text, I would have these images of being in our, we called it the TV room, where we would watch TV and the computer was, and that's where my dad would work. And I remember him getting excited about, oh, Irene means peace, so Rennie, that'll be her name. Like his excitement about each one of these different things would just come up every single time I got into my little closet booth and read any chapter. So once all of those things kind of came together, it felt like, oh, well, this is kind of a no-brainer. And I have to say, because we did this as a Screen Actors Guild union job, this job put me over the line for getting insurance. You have to make a certain amount of money each year to get your insurance, and it's good health insurance. And that may sound like a crazy idea to some of your international listeners, but in the States, that's one way that we get insurance is through our union and earning it. So this job put me over the line.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Well,
That's
David,
really nice.
David is so well trained as an actor in his undergraduate at Evansville, where one of his colleagues there was Rami Malek, who's been in a lot of movies, won an Oscar, and his MFA at Rutgers, Mason Gross School of Arts. And he's just such a well-trained actor that he knows how to bring characters to life, many different kinds of characters. And then he's an expert on all these international accents. So instead of just reading straight through, you hear these people speaking with these accents, people have said, who have read the book, it made the book even better because it just brought it to life. It's like they say it's like listening to a movie you can picture up on screen by the way it's described. And in fact, David, I just got an email or a text from a colleague, a wonderful young African-American woman here who'd listened to your whole thing, and she goes, oh gosh, it was the total experience of this book. That's what she said.
Well, it's very nice. So one thing I want to say is that the level of trust that you just heard from my dad, that is priceless in a creative collaboration. So if you really think that someone is great and is going to do a good job for you, even if you have notes to give them, that's fine. But if you can always communicate it with a genuine feeling of, I trust you, whether you say it explicitly or not, I think if it's in your heart and your mind, it comes through, even in an email. And that trust is priceless, because it lets the artist really do everything that they're capable of doing. You can always go back and do a retake if you need to, but you got to give them I think you're gonna get the best result. And that's a decent segue to a brief thing about George Clooney, which is that's how he directs. He is a master of directing. He's a master actor, and he's a master of, I'm going to say, charm in the best sense of that word, and that he knows how to make people feel confident and at ease. And he brings them in, and on set, I've never seen a group of people happier and more relaxed. There's no yelling going on, at least not while I was around. And it's just total trust. Even as you're trying to figure it out, maybe I wasn't giving him exactly what he wanted, but boy, he made me feel like I was the best director in the world while he led me towards what he wanted. And I mean, that's to beat that. And so I think my dad is similar at that. And he's done a very similar thing in his full-time job of working at these churches and seminary. You know, I remember one time after I finished grad school, he told me, you know, we always talk about what's our calling. It's like, I think my calling might actually be coaching. I really love helping people. And I don't know if he still feels that way, but I think that it is one of his great skills, is understanding the creative mind and how to communicate with someone, because he has empathy for it. He's creative himself. So he understands how you want to talk to somebody. And again, I could have just said trust and stopped there, because trust is such a big thing to give somebody. I think it's one of the greatest gifts you can give somebody is trust.
Yeah, mom gave that to you too, David, from the very beginning.
Oh, definitely.
And you had a good experience on the set of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, didn't you?
Absolutely. Same thing. I mean, the Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino, who run that show, are very, very kind and passionate, and they have a very strong, specific vision. And they bring the joy of it to the table. And so everybody just wants to create this very specific thing together. And everyone's happy to be there because they know it's not always like that, you know? So you look around the room and every single department is working hard, but they don't look too stressed, you know? I haven't worked on that many sets, thankfully, where it's been kind of a negative vibe. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that it doesn't really create very good work, and people don't want to work that way. They don't want to spend weeks to months with people yelling and stuff. So it's just, and it doesn't always yield the best product anyway. So it's sort of like lose-lose when you go that way.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. You know, when your default is to be kind, you bring out the best in people. When your default is to look for faults and errors, people are going to trip up, and it's not going to be a happy environment. So I think there's a lot of validity in what you say. David, who was your favorite character to narrate?
I really think
stands out for you.
Yeah, I think Frank Harkin was my favorite. He was really fun to do. I just love that character. For whatever reason, he was very relatable to me. And but I think my favorite, I would love to play Frank Harkin. I mean, I already have with my voice. But I think my favorite to narrate was when Evelyn is going through the woods and she's trying to find her. She's completely lost. And I loved the writing of that. I thought it was so specific. There was lots of good research done about the actual plants in that area, and they were woven together in a way that was active and almost like the forest was alive and kind of getting inside her head. And so to read that was really fun. There's a really nice build to that. I mean, I think one advantage to a writer who's also been a performer is they have a sense of how something feels to people in a room, and not to call preaching performing, but there's a major element of performance in preaching. One of the big things about my dad is his PhD is in essentially public speaking, homiletics, and political rhetoric. But really what I want to focus on is the amount of at-bats that my dad has had engaging with people in a live setting, which is thousands of times. And so when you have that much experience, you have a sense of the flow of people's attention spans and how much to vary things up and when to build. And so I don't know the book is full of that, but that section really was genuinely like adrenaline pumping fun for me to read. If I have to pick.
It's later in the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult accent?
I think the most difficult was probably, there was a chapter with, I think, 11 Russians in one room and just making them all sound different. And I like doing Russian voices, but to come up with 11 different ones was a fun challenge. It was a sweaty challenge because I happened to be doing that in July in New York in an unair-conditioned closet, because you don't want to hear the air conditioner when you're recording. And so that one took me longer than than the others, because I kept having to stop and I do like a page and then go out and towel off, go back in and make sure the voices all still sound the same for each character. But it was satisfying when it was done. But that one took a lot of time.
I can imagine. I mean, 11 characters.
It's I think there's 11. It's something like that. It's upwards of 11. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, can you read us a sample? I'd really like to hear something. You narrate something. Okay, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear David narrate a sample of the book.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors, and talented indie authors. Books with Bridgetti.
Welcome back. You're watching Books with Bridgetti. And David, we're looking forward to hear you narrate something out of Assassin's Manuscript.
All right. So this is early in the book. It's a chapter called Sleight of Hand, page 12 for anyone that wants to follow along. The British Museum had been under red alert, which meant all bags, even those of the gallery warders, had to be checked. Normally, security was so lax that guards, tourists, and readers came and went as they pleased without being searched. But now, everyone had to be frisked. The alert increased the challenge for Nigel. Instead of going through the front door of the museum to the information booth for check-in, he had to pass by old Arthur Bledsoe in the warder's quarters. Arthur had worked at the museum nearly as long as Nigel had. "Morning, Arthur." "Morning, Nigel. What's in the bag?" "Oh, just a present for a friend," said Nigel. "Going to a birthday party after work." "So, what's the present? Looks like a big book." "Good guess." "I'm going to have to make you unwrap it and show it to me, Nigel." He'd never been very good at lying, but for once he felt calm and said, "Arthur, if you can't trust me, who can you trust?" Arthur got off his stool and stepped toward Nigel. "Come on, Nigel, you know the rules. Don't play games with me. Open the bloody package or I'll have to call security." "I am security," said Nigel. Arthur blocked the entrance. "Nigel, open that package or you don't go in." Okay, you've caught me. He paused for a moment. I didn't want to tell you, but this present is for you. For me? Arthur said, back on his heels. That's right, for you. I didn't want to tell you. Thought I could slip by this story about it being a birthday present for a friend, but you really did a job and caught me. Oh, get it. This is a test. Right again, Arthur. You're sharp today. No way to slip anything by old Arthur. Arthur beamed, relieved. So, he said in a little more than a whisper. Sorry, that's Nigel. So, he said in a little more than a whisper. It's a present for me. Yes, but not much of a surprise now, I'm afraid. That is, unless. Unless what? Barked Arthur. Unless you act surprised at the party after work. A party? For me? I can act surprised. But you won't be able to fake it very well if you open your present now. Then I won't open it now. I'll wait until after work and open it, he said with a broad smile, exhibiting a brown row of crooked teeth. Nigel walked right past him with his fully wrapped package and said, There's no way anyone could ever get anything by old Arthur. And don't you forget it, Arthur said, beaming. That's, yeah.
Oh
That's
my
Arthur
gosh,
and
that is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Oh my word. For anybody out there who's just listened to that and wants to break into narration, what advice would you give them? Because you nailed it. You nailed it.
Well, I think the thing is, whether it's doing voices or figuring out the voice you're going to do for the narration, let yourself have fun as you discover, work the way that you like to work. I think it's really easy to see someone say, I don't know how they do that. Maybe I'll do it exactly like them. And you're not going to do it exactly like them. There's only one Jim Carrey, right? No one should try to be Jim Carrey. And I think Jim Carrey would say that. But you got to figure out your own way to do some of the stuff that you see him doing. And you can look, if you hear Jim Carrey do something, you're like, I think I could do that, then you take that, right? I mean, one thing that I love about actors like Ian McKellen, whenever they talk about how they learned acting, Brian Cox says similar things. They just sort of all watched each other when they were young and borrowed from each other. And if they could do a similar technique or style that they saw them doing in a play, they would just do it. And I think it's nice because it's a little less precious. But I think, just if you learn by imitating, do that. If you have to read it a million times to get it, do that. If you want to read it cold and that makes you feel better, you got to get your at bats so you can learn the way that you prefer to work. I've gotten many at bats by over 18 years of professional acting and 7 years of training. The training was obvious. We worked on it every day. When I got out of school, I was like, what am I going to do to be as busy as I was in school? And so I threw myself into improv. I did stand up as much as I could, because even if you book a couple jobs a year, you might only work a couple days. So you got to keep yourself busy and hone your craft. I was lucky to have voiceover auditions all the time, but between those auditions, I wanted to be ready. So I started doing tons of impressions. So a lot of it kind of takes time, but it also doesn't, because you can start working immediately on something and you never know what opportunities are going to happen because you just start working. The best thing you can do is just start. And by working, I mean, keep it fun and play and do it your way. But that's the best thing I could say, is just have fun and do it as much as you can.
That's great.
Wherever you can. Get up, perform wherever you live. I mean, especially now with, Instagram and people being able to have a following online, you can literally you don't even need to go to a place necessarily to practice your craft. You can do characters on your phone in your room,
Absolutely.
That is such great advice, David. And I give similar advice, but I need to say, for our international audience. At bats is an American baseball
Oh,
term.
that's true. Yeah.
You know, when you're at bat, you want to get as many times
Yeah.
to be at the plate. I don't know what the Bridgetti, I don't know what the equivalent term for cricket is. Maybe it's similar, times to be able to hit the cricket ball. But that's what he's talking about, is just repetition and repetition. And I want to say that was just a tiny piece, what he just read. The whole book is like that, with all these accents and all these characters coming to life. And I have to thank David again and again, because the audiobook has given such a bump to sales for paperback and ebooks that it didn't have at the time before we did the audiobook. So if you've read the book before, you're going to want to get the audiobook and listen to how David brings it to life.
What was, from this whole process of, writing the book, starting with 700 pages and narrowing it down over so many years, and now having the audiobook, what have you learned from this entire process?
I would say something similar to what David said earlier, which is, I think all of us have a bit of a creative streak in us, and you should follow that. Don't let somebody tell you you can't act, or you can't write, or you can't sing, or you can't write poetry, or whatever. You may not be great at it, but give it a shot. You've been in this boring job, and you've always wanted to do something a little different, and somebody's held you back, or you're worried about what's going to happen, to get it out there. It's a risk. Anytime you go for something that's going to be public, I know this book is not perfect. Not everybody's going to love it. There's probably a flaw or two here and there that would make it better. David's right. You're just never going to get an A+. So if you quit worrying about getting an A+, then just try something different. And I love the description Frederick Buechner gives of your true calling, and that is, it's the grand coalescence between your greatest joy and the world's deepest need. And when you put those two together, you begin to find out what you'd really like to do with your life. And when you do that, you're in the zone. You're just like, whoa, I don't even have to be paid to do this. It's nice to be paid, but you do it for the love of it and the joy of it. That's what I've learned.
David, from working with your dad and being on this whole journey with him, what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, I think a lot of what my dad just said, and to add to that, when people say to someone, I don't think you're very good at this, you shouldn't do that, I think most of the time, because there's exceptions to everything, I guess, but most of the time that's not a great thing to say to somebody. But people are going to say it, right? It doesn't matter. People are going to say, don't do that, you're not very good. And what I say to anyone who's been through that experience, don't let that be the reason you don't do it. If you don't want to do something, that's fine. But don't let it be because some bridge troll who had a bad day, or maybe like a nice person who had a bad day, and they just saw your thing or read your thing at the wrong time, and they said, don't do it. Don't let them be the reason you don't do something. If you don't want to do something, that's fine. But you gotta, I've had people tell me they don't like my work plenty of times. And that's okay, because you're right. Not everyone's going to like it. It's not possible. There's not a work of art in the world that everybody likes. There's just not. And so I think that's another piece of freedom. But I guess I'll just reiterate what I said before. If you have the opportunity to collaborate with someone who you trust and trusts you, and you respect each other, and you feel that you work in a way that's going to make sense, do everything you can to do that, because those are like the best experiences. The other ones are great because you learn from them and they're hard and they teach you lessons. But those rough ones help you understand, oh man, when I see a good project, I'll know it and I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to do it. And this was one of them. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful we got to do it. And it was, yeah, I hope everyone, whatever they do in life, that they could find collaborators that trust them as much as my dad trusted me. And yeah, that's my, and that opportunity is out there. So I think look for it and you'll see it.
David and William, congratulations on an awesome project and a great book and a great audiobook. We're out of time. We could have talked for another hour. Really, we could have. So a huge big thanks to both of you for sharing your experiences with putting this book together, getting it narrated, and a huge big shout out and thank you to our audience who stuck with us as well. And we'd love to have you back on the show again. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you back on another episode of Books with Bridgetti. Thank you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids like to teach called bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.